for, there's a handful of those players that are going to come off the board today, right? That are gone. So the list obviously gets a lot shorter, and depending on what you're looking for, the free agent market, if you will, in terms of finding the right fit, probably comes a little bit shorter. So you're looking at the trade, trade scenarios and the like. But so yeah, we've got time, but certainly you feel it's an interesting market right now because, as in years past with the raising cap, you've seen guys, and it'll take a day or so to flush everything out, once all the signings come on the board, to where, everybody usually takes a step back to see where they're at and what opportunities may be out there for us. But with the cap rising, one of the things that we talked about even going back in January is the probability of teams signing their own players, in my opinion, increased this year than really the last, it seems like a long time, but really since we ran into the flat cap, through COVID, where guys had money to retain their players if they so choose, and so you saw a lot of that really leading up to today, and even before the bell went off, of a lot of people retaining their players, left fewer players on the market. And one of you always want to feel like you've addressed needs coming out of free agency or today, because as I said, the list gets a little bit smaller. But what we didn't want to do was just sign people to duplicate what we have here. And so we've got some flexibility as it relates to the cap, but you're always looking to. I always would rather have players, so we'll see how that continues to work itself out in the coming days.
Well, you nailed it. The consistent theme leading up to free agency was that teams just kept their players.
Yeah.
And obviously you did that with John Tavares, but the most prominent free agent chose not to do that, and that, of course, would be Mitch Marner. Marner obviously ended up wanting to go to Vegas. And I'm curious if you can take us through the timeline here, Brad, in terms of when it became clear to you and your staff that Mitch did not want to be a Maple Leaf anymore.
I don't know if there's an aha moment, Brian. Really over the course of the last year, I guess, when we were able to sign him, we went to his camp to engage, and start the process. And early on, they just felt they wanted to wait some time, and then it was they made it clear to us that they wanted to wait to the end of the season. And I say all this, Mitch is fully within his rights to do, as any player is, to do whatever they want. So there's no responsibility on them to say we have to negotiate at a certain point. So I want to be clear on that. And then as we went through the process, and it became clearer and clearer to us that the potential is that they may not want to engage in contract. We looked at other opportunities, right? And throughout this process with Mitch's contractual rights that he had, he controlled a lot of this process, right? And again, that was negotiated. That's fully within his rights. And so in a lot of ways, he controlled the process because he had a no-move clause. Now, that doesn't prohibit us having conversations on potential outcomes. And I'm not going to get into get into the weeds in terms of my discussions with the player as representative, because I think those things are, those should be left confidential. But I would say, Brian, the short version is, as we got into the season, it became more and more clear that that there was a strong possibility that they wouldn't necessarily want to be engaging in any discussions with us.
When you mention, not engaging or not revealing the details of speaking with his representative, I'm curious, at any point did you speak with Mitch directly?
Yeah, I have conversations with their players, of course. I mean, the business part of it, that's why they hire agents. So, the agents hire handle all the business affairs, and that's not, that's the way it should be, right? That's why they have agents to handle that. The player's job is to play. But you always, with a player of Mitch's magnitude, and you have conversations. You certainly have conversations at certain points with the player, but the bulk of our communication is always through the player's representative.
So, Brad, you threw out a phrase at your season-ending press conference that stuck around, the DNA phrase, and you talked about the change needed in that department. How would you characterize your progress to date on that?
It's amazing that the line would stick around in our market. Jesus.
It was a good one, though.
Better than snot.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah. Well, again, when I talk about the DNA, and I tried to reference it that day, is, I know we all want to jump in and say, okay, we got to change 20 players. That's not it. It's a lot of this is mentality. Certainly, we're going to try to find ways to make our team better, and that sometimes does involve of changing of personnel. But it's also in those critical moments, right? You get to the end of the playoffs and we're all emotional. You lose in Game 7 of round 2, and it feels like you've missed the playoffs for 5 straight years. And the focus when I looked at our group was just in those critical moments, finding a way to be better. To finding a way to be at our very best, and that's what I was focused around when I talk about that. So some of that's internally, some of that's or whether it be from between the years, and some of that's in terms of personnel. So that's when I talk about that, or when I made that statement, that's really what I was alluding to, and from. There's a lot of things we work on with our group over the course of the summer and in our communication with them. But as far as the personnel side, it's a work in progress right now. We've made, we were able to handle a couple of our files prior to today with John Tavares, Matthew Nyes, the acquisition of Michelli. And we'll continue to work at it. We continue to work as we said earlier, and as Noodles has mentioned. We've got some time here before we start the season. Today's a big day on the calendar, but we will continue to work at trying to find ways to improve our team.
With Brad Treliving, the GM of the Maple Leafs, we haven't heard from Austin Matthews, really since the end of the season. I wasn't anticipating hearing from him today, but I'm curious if